battle at HMAS Stirling, base on Garden Island here in the west. Also the host of a submarine escape training facility, only one of 6 in the world and the only one of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere.
And we see an array of medals on the chest for extensive service overseas, and you know, the greater Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc.
Taking the salute today for the Navy, the first time from HMAS Stirling, their commanding officer, Captain Ken Burley. Started in command at HMAS Stirling in May of last year. His career in the past has been in command of Fremantle-class patrol boat, the HMAS Launceston, and the guided missile frigate HMAS Darwin, among other commands. Perth, his hometown, joined the Navy in September of 1984, and there you see the HMAS Ballarat.
Yes, and the life ring holder there. Bit of tradition there with the Navy, as of course life rings were thrown over the board in case a member went over the side, but now they've become a ceremonial instrument of the Navy, and I believe that they're carried in a similar fashion as the Army carries their colours or banners, and I might be wrong with this one, but I expect that it's a junior officer or a junior sailor that has the privilege of carrying that. I'm sure anybody who's in the Navy will put me right if I haven't got that quite correct.
There's the Australian Army Band, Perth. Leading the band, we've been told, Captain Nick Bowman. Subunit of the Australian Army Band. The unit comprises 11 bands right around the nation. Once named the Western Command Band and the band of the 5th Military District, the Australian Army Band Perth formed at Swan Barracks in 1949.
First of the Army contingents today is the 10th Light Horse Regiment, seen with their distinctive emu plumes in their slouch hats. The regiment was raised on 10th of October 1914 and is the only AIF Light Horse Regiment raised in Western Australia.
Contingent of around 450 marching today from 13th Brigade and district support units. And back in 1912, 13th Brigade headquartered in Perth, units across WA. Current brigade actually formed in 1988, the original fighting on the Western Front. I mentioned before the 10th Light Horse there. Also alongside them marching in 1128, the 16th Battalion as well.
1128 Battalion following up. The unit was raised in 1987 from the amalgamation of the 11th and 28th Independent Rifle Companies. Many members of the unit have served on current operations in Solomon Islands and on regional assistance missions in Western Australia and up in Darwin. The battalion today has the colours of both the 11th and 28th battalions, both West Australian units raised for active service during the First World War. Next up is the 13th Engineer Regiment, which was raised on 1st of July 2022. The regiment consists of 2 engineering squadrons, as well as the regimental headquarters. 13th Field is one of the longest continually serving units within Western Australia, with a history that goes back to the 1912 Kitchener reforms. The units of 13th Brigade are headquartered at Irwin Barracks in Karrakatta and is the Australian Army's largest foothold in Western Australia. Now we can see the men of Bravo Company's 16th Battalion in their distinctive Scottish attire. Bravo Company has the heritage to the Cameroon Highlanders and continues that heritage with their distinctive dress. Here we can see the men and women of the 13th Combat Service Support Battalion, or CSB, which was formed in 1995 with the amalgamation of several subunits of 13th Brigade. The battalion provides logistic support to the combat units of the brigade, which is befitting of the unit's motto, soldiers supporting soldiers.
Remember, of course, when the WA Anzac program ends at 10:30 today, we'll cross to Gallipoli for the dawn service live at Anzac Cove. Drum corps of the Australian Air Force Cadets. Public and the very audible face of 7th Wing, anticipating many activities throughout the year, of course, including Anzac Day.
And here we have representatives of the Royal Australian Air Force. They'll be based at RAF Base Pearce, and we can see extensive service on some chests there. RAF Base Pearce is home to a number of squadrons, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. And there we can see service, Greater Middle East, Iraq, some East Timor. And there we have some trainees there with their flight wings and very junior rank. They'll be undergoing training in jet trainers at RAF Base Pearce.
Speaking of the RAAF base at Pearce, first occupied by the Air Force in March of 1938. As we move on to see the Jeeps, such a well recognisable part of Anzac Day marches over the years. Saw the flame a short time ago. Of course, the flame would have been carrying on the Jeep, lit from the Eternal Flame at Kings Park. So many great stories amongst this group. There is the Eternal Flame right there. The car behind, you'll see the Model T Scout. You would have seen it a moment ago. Tom Newby, 104 years of age, from 4th Battalion. Spent 29 months in New Guinea in the past. There he is right there. Big wave and get over you, Tom. Karen in the Model T ambulance. Imagine that. Must be Malcolm Stone, the 2-tour veteran from 68 to 71. Daughter Jennifer alongside him. A couple of the Rhodesian forces there. Neil Potter, Graham Belton, and Neil Alexandro. Car 12, that's Lynn Fleet, the wife of the late Bob Fleet from the Royal Australian Navy. Jeep restoration is tremendous. outstanding condition that they are now in.
And then we have a military policeman sitting there, front and centre, keeping an eye on the crowd and the soldiers as they march down the terrace.
Into the veterans. Still get to come along in their vehicles. As we say farewell to the Jeeps. John East, the passenger there, served in Korea between 1955 and 56. Actually had his 21st birthday there. Mum sent a cake that never arrived. It did arrive at his home 6 months after he was discharged. And he says it was still delicious. G'day to you, John. Car number 5 leading the way there for the veteran vehicles. Car 3, Susan Nags, member of the Rands. We'll see more of the Rands later on. G'day to you, Susan. Bevan Piper served 2nd Battalion, RAR in Korea, 52 and 53. Editor 11, car 4.
Yes, he had his Vietnam medals on with a couple of distinctive commendations. And in this car we've got Len McKenna, driven by Graham McEwen, who's been doing this for many, many years.
Len McKenna turning 100 next week, we're told.
Oh my goodness.
Presbyterian Ladies College Pipe Band, formed back in 1981. They wear the black watch tartan. There they are.
And where we see the banner for, in fact, I'll talk about the 44th Battalion banner that's there. That's a facsimile of the one that was taken away in World War I, and it's being carried by young Luca Muir-Anderson, who organised that. The banner in World War I was signed by the Mayor of Claremont, and he's had the Mayor of Claremont sign this one. And this guy's a young 10th Light Horse chap, and he's just shown great leadership. So Brigadier on the screen there, you keep a lookout for this young man. World War II. One of the things we tend to forget about is the great sacrifice of World War II. Australians had 90,000 casualties made up of killed, wounded, 8,500 killed during training, and about 30,000 prisoners. Now that equates to 90,000 people. So for those that are watching the football this afternoon at the MCG, look at that crowd, and that will give you an idea of the scale of sacrifice for World War II.
We saw the Brigadier Amanda Williamson just a short time ago. The first time at a Perth Anzac Day march. Took over 13th in January 2024.
And there's a number of banners there in homage to the Second World War Western Australian units, 2nd, 4th Machine Gunners, etc. 2nd 16 Battalion fought tenaciously on the Kokoda track. And there we see the more modern groups post 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Iraq War itself, and peacekeepers. All served. About 66,000 peacekeepers have served from Australia during UN operations. And the whole idea of these generic banners as such is because we've got people who served in units that may not be represented in WA. So the RSL has put these banners on so people can march behind those. So there we have Legacy. There's Mick Radwell down there, I saw him, and John Burridge has got his young grandson with him, Sebastian, today. Legacy's role is to look after war widows and their children and veterans of ill health. Well done, Legacy.
The promise made in the trenches during the First World War to look after the missus and the kids. It's Much broader than that now, continues 100+ years of support legacy. There's their very important banner, very important organisation even today.
Next up, we can see the West Australian Great War Living History Association, being led today by ex-War Officer Class 2 Bob Wise, who served a total of 31 years in the ADF. Association is made up of military enthusiasts, with the majority being ex-service personnel.
That was the Churchlands Senior High School Marching Band. Continuing on, 2 of them marching today, we're told. The Racks.
For the first time, we have the servicewomen of the ADF marching as one contingent. The contingent is made up of women of the Royal Australian Naval Service, Royal Australian Army Corps, Royal Australian Air Force, and the Royal Australian Nursing Corps. All marching today under one banner, which is great to see.
Racks and the Rams, we saw a number of those a short time ago too. The Naval Association of Australia there.
Yeah, it's about 100 years old, the Naval Association. It looks after the welfare of ex-naval veterans, comradeship and other needs as well. So what do we have here? We have Fleet Air Arm Association. HMAS Melbourne and Sydney were carriers, and these days the Fleet Air Arm does consist of a couple of squadrons of seaborne type helicopters and do a fantastic job with search and rescue, etc. Hello to you too, sir.
Perth Association, the national branch of HMAS Perth.
Yes, there's been 3 Perths. There was one sunk in World War II. The second, Perth number 2, did 3 tours of Vietnam, and Perth number 3 was decommissioned in 2006.
And worth noting for people who might be tuning in for the first time, names pass from ship to ship. As one ship is decommissioned, the new ship does take the name.
Absolutely, they keep the tradition going, and well done for them for that.
Just before then, you saw the HMAS Darwin Association as well, before we jumped ahead to the Victoria Park Brass Band. Well known to the RAAF 460 Squadron used to march near the Victoria Park Brass Band, and they knew that by giving the band their insignia, it would ensure it would always be seen on Anzac Day. They're honoured again to be part of the Anzac Day Parade. Victoria Park Brass Band marching in honour of the 460 Squadron with those insignias on the jackets of the band.
And behind them we have the Anzac class. Those ships are equipped with the Seahawk helicopters and used for anti-submarine work. And there's been quite a few Anzac class, I think about 6 or 7 or so. We can see the names on the banner as they come through. We can see service there in Iraq, Timor, Afghanistan, and they got a meritorious unit citation, and they've also served in the Middle East.
Tribal class destroyers, the Runta, the Warramunga.
Absolutely. And there we've got Jack Lacroix there in the wheelchair, OAM. I had a chat to him this morning. He's still 100% with it. Very much great support from his family, so well done, Jack. I said I'd give you a call out. And the tribal class there, we can see the names of the ship, Arunta, Warramunga and Bataan. Bataan has service in World War II and Korea. Royal Australian Navy Communications Branch, formed in 1946, and it was instigated by a group of World War II telephonists, coders and signalmen. You don't fight war without communications.
Saw the Clearance Divers Association go through as well.
Yes, and they've served Vietnam, Gulf War, Afghanistan. All their service on Afghanistan was on land, and a lot of EOD, explosive ordnance demolition work, etc. And they're still looking like a very fit bunch of blokes. Tingarea Association has just gone past. They're a group of chaps from HMAS Lewin, from the junior recruits.
You can see now the banner of the 2nd 6th Cavalry Regiment Association. Second 6 was raised as an armoured recon unit attached to the 6th Division in the North African campaign in the Second World War. Later reorganised as a commando regiment for service in the Pacific during the final stages of the war.
So there we have the Vietnam Veterans Association. That's led by Richard Williams, OAM. We can see him in the front with his slouch hat. And it's a group of servicemen and women who have done their time that, again, don't have their own units to march behind.
Don't forget, after the march finishes today, everyone will be heading down to Langley Park, the RSL staging its very first mateship day. There'll be some food and all sorts of military things to look at. And I'm also told a bit of two-up. Everyone's welcome if you're in the vicinity. No commemorative service today.
There's National Servicemen's Association, 65 to 72. 50th anniversary this year of the last intake, 4 of 72. The last men to be discharged from national service who completed their time in NASHOs was on the 26th of March 74. And so that's a 50th anniversary, and that information was provided by Mr. Greg Clues.
Following behind them is the Royal Australian Armoured Corps Association, WA. Started in 1946. The majority of its members are former service personnel of the 10th Light Horse Regiment.
It's the City of Coburn Pipe Band as well, for those wondering. Good crowds in today, despite the chilly conditions.
Now we have the men of the 3rd Cavalry Regiment Vietnam Association.
No, there's Red Webb down there. Sorry, mate. Just jumped in there or over you. I apologise.
That's all right, Steve. Next up is the 1st Armoured Regiment Association, being led today by Mr. Bob Snape, who served with C Squadron 1st Armoured Regiment in 68-69. Unit took part in heavy fighting in Vietnam, where it earned battle honours for Coral Balmoral and Bin Ba in support of Fight Area.
Now we have some artillery chaps in the screen. They can trace their roots back to the West Australian Troop of the Volunteer Horse Artillery in 1872. And their motto is everywhere, wear right and glory lead. Battles are won on the strength of artillery. We see young children on parade today. The RSL has encouraged children marching with relatives, and it's great to see them taking part.
Also worth mentioning too, for those next of kin, medal worn on the right breast. For those who receive the medals themselves, they'll be worn on the left breast. If you're watching on for the first time the Anzac Day march through the Perth CBD here on ABC television.
We can see now the men of the Royal Australian Engineers Association. The engineers have served in every conflict since the Boer War, alongside and providing support to all other combat corps of the Australian Army. Next up is the Royal Australian Survey Corps Association, seen here with their distinctive purple berets. Survey Corps was established in 1915 and continued until 1996.
And there we have the Royal Australian Signals Association, led by Bob Coventry. Units in WA, 109 6 Squadron as part of 13 Brigade, 152 Signal Squadron, the SAS 6 Squadron. Mike Brennan is the patron of the Signals Association. And next year is the RA6 100th anniversary.
Scotch College Pipe Band, always adding to the colour of Anzac Day in Perth, the Anzac Day March.
And here we have the Royal Australian Regiment coming into view. 1 RAR on the screen. We can see them with their blue colour. Duty first is their motto. They've served Korea right through to Afghanistan. 2 RAR, second to none. Korea, Malaya, Vietnam, Rwanda and Timor. 4th Battalion served in Borneo, actually had the distinction of having the first national serviceman drafted, served with 4RAR in the Indonesian confrontation. And they were redesignated to 2 Commando Regiment in 2009. 5th Battalion, Tiger Battalion, Vietnam, Timor and Afghanistan. 5-7RAR have served in Iraq and Timor. They're a mechanised unit. You can see that with the M113s on the banner. 5RAR is a very, very proud battalion. In fact, they're all very, very proud battalions. I just happen to know some people in 5. They don't let me forget. And there we can see the casualties from Vietnam for 5th Battalion. And we're being led there by more modern veterans of the recent campaigns. And there's some of the Vietnam veterans behind us there. 6RAR, very famous for the Battle of Long Tan in Vietnam, as well as another battle that's very not very well heard of, and that is Operation... Oh, nope, just lost it. Sorry about that, people.
Trinity College, pipes and drums. Behind them, 7th RAR, the Pig Battalion, as they were known. Shout out to Peter Curley, 80 years of age. Premiership player with West Perth back in 1971, marching today with the 7th Battalion, the Anzac Day Parade of 2024. Good to have you with us wherever you're watching around the state of WA.
And behind them we have the banner of 8RAR. They did serve 2 tours in Vietnam, and we can see that also as Singapore as well. They won a distinguished, a Cross of Gallantry with Palm Unit Citation for their role in Operation Hammersley. 8-9RAR have served in Timor and Afghanistan. And 9th Battalion did 1 tour in Vietnam fairly late in the piece. In fact, yes, just the 1 tour, and we can see some very proud soldiers marching there. Well, there we go. Association of Australian Army Teams, training teams. First in, last out is their motto. They entered Vietnam in 1962 and left Vietnam in 1972. 4 Victoria Crosses for the training team. Keith Payne is still with us. The others were Badco, Simpson and Wheatley, 2 of those posthumous.
Following now, we have the Royal West Australian Regiment Association, led today by its president, Jeff Tooth. Regiment was formed in July 1960 and continues to this day as part of 13th Brigade.
And there we have the Special Air Service Association, led by Troy Simmons, wounded 3 times in Afghanistan. And there's Bags of Style holding one of the ends of the banners. Bags has just released a book about his time in the Australian SAS as well as the Rhodesian SAS, and I believe it's a good read. Also, Mick Malone has also just released a book as well, one of the legends down at the regiment there. So if you want to know a little bit about Vietnam and what these boys did, that's it. Oh, interesting. These chaps on screen now with the cloth badges, C Squadron Rhodesian SAS, marching with the association for the first time. We see a Z-Force banner there. Literally the forerunner of the Australian SAS, and we've got a chap there with a regiment beret on. The Z-Force members that were still serving in the 50s were some of the first trainers of the Australian SAS company in 1957.
Salvation Army Perth Fortress Band, the oldest Salvation Army band in WA. Over 128 years of service.
And there we have the Aviators, 161 recce flight, raised in 1965 for Vietnam. They initially flew Cessna 180 fixed-wing aircraft and Bell Sioux helicopters, and eventually went on to Pilatus Porters. And there we have the Service Corps in front of us. A lot of drivers, etc. with the Service Corps end up joining RAOC and Amalgamated.
Following up now is the Royal Australian Army Ordnance Corps. The Corps bear the motto, "To the warrior his arms." It was responsible for a wide array of support tasks to the Army. Marching there today is Warrant Officer Class 1 Baxter, who received the Commendation for Distinguished Service for his work with SOCOM in the Middle East. Following behind is the Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineer Association. The association can trace its roots back to 1950, when members of the Midland Workshop, now the Midland Markets, raised the association. RAMI provide support to the combat corps of the Australian Army and are integral in the Army's operations. We can see veterans there of Vietnam, Timor, Afghanistan, all marching today. The Royal Australian Army Pay Corps, one of the smallest corps in the Australian Army, established in September 1914. It's been in service with every theatre of war and operation that the Australian Army has participated in since 1914. The Military Police Association, led today by Captain Sean Colopy, with the motto, "For the troops, with the troops." The MPs were previously known as the Australian Army Provost Corps, formed in April 1916. The unit is responsible for battlefield traffic control, POW handing, investigation of service offences, and amongst other integral things.
Royal Australian Army Nursing Corps. Branches in most states around the nation, formed in WA here in 1981. Nursing service serving both World War I and World War II. Then Korea, PNG, Malaya, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Gulf War, and many peacekeeping services around the world.
And just marched through then was Skyville, officer training scheme that was set up for national servicemen. They showed a little bit of promise on leadership. Whilst they were doing their basic training, they were then selected for officer training school at Skyville. The Royal Australian Air Force, just a shout out to them. The RAF Museum is open between 10 AM and 3 PM. And if you want to see a Lancaster, a Catalina, and I think it's a Hornet that they've got there, it's a fantastic museum and highly recommended for a visit for those that haven't seen it. Fantastic history in there. And the Royal Australian Air Force, of course, served from World War I right through to today. Fledgling Australian Flying Corps during World War I, and flying the most modern jets available today. We have number 25, City of Perth Squadron. They are based at RAF Base Pearce and carry out a great deal of administrative functions these days, but in World War II they flew liberators out of Kundanan to northwest of WA on their way to do bombing missions in Timor and Indonesia. Now, 3rd Telecommunications Squadron there. We've got people on the banners, husband and wife team, Tony and True Summers. Tony's ex-Army, True is ex-RAF. How they met, I don't know, but they're doing a fantastic job today. And it's the longest serving continuous unit in the Australian Air Force, 24/7 surveillance, intelligence operations in support of Australian national security.
Here's the Perth Metro Pipe Band on Anzac Day of 2024. Thanks for joining us on ABC Television. Clint Wilden, Steve Danaher and Paul Salpietro with you as we cover the Anzac Day March. There is no service today at the concert hall. The RSL has instead decided to host a mateship day on Langley Park straight after the march.
And here we have the New Zealanders that put the NZ in Anzac, and then we have a relationship with them going back to the Boer War and have served beside each other in all conflicts and peacekeeping operations, and they're fantastic contributors. Royal Australian Navy, New Zealand Navy, I apologise, Kiwis. Again, a very healthy expat New Zealand contingent there.
Now we can see the British Ex-Service Association, formed in 1948, has about 500 members. You can see an array there of service medals signifying campaigns in Iraq, Borneo, Northern Ireland, both Air Force, Army and Navy service.
Then we have the Royal Air Force Veterans Association. That's a fellowship type of organisation for those Royal Air Force veterans from about 1960 onwards. And I did notice one chap there with Falklands 1982 medals.
Now we can see the Airborne Forces Association, being led today by Dave Abels, who received the Distinguished Conduct Medal for his actions on Goose Green during the Falklands War. Also on the parade today are members of the Royal Marines, the Royal Irish Regiment, and again a wide array of service that can be seen there.
And here we have the North American veterans. So they served with Australians or alongside Australians in Belgium and France in World War I and have been staunch allies with Australia since then. And such battles as the Coral Sea, New Guinea in World War II, and where they fought together and defend their freedom and rights. Veterans of Foreign Wars, another American group, and we can see that there by a very dapper looking chap there leading them. N-class destroyers. The Nizam in particular, they had a bit of a disaster off Cape Lewin towards the end of World War II. 10 members were lost overboard, and there's a poignant memorial down at the lighthouse at Cape Lewin for those that wish to take a look at that.
Now, we ask this every year, but it is important for people tuning in. What does the A stand for on those banners?
The A signifies service on Gallipoli. So the brass A was worn on the colour patch of First World War service personnel and was highly regarded, especially in the later years of the war when not many Gallipoli blokes were still in service.
So the 2nd, 11th were actually at the Gallipoli landing that first morning on Anzac Cove.
Well, just a little bit of a correction there, Clint. It was the 11th Battalion. 2nd 11th is the World War II brother, if you like, or son of the 11th Battalion.
See now the 2nd 16th Battalion, formed in 1940 as a West Australian battalion of the 21st Brigade. The unit saw heavy fighting and is most notable for its actions on the Kokoda Track, where it halted the Japanese advance. Prior to that, the unit saw service in Syria against the Vichy French, and in the later parts of the war on the northern beaches and at Balikpapan and Borneo.
And here we have the 2nd 28th Battalion and the 24th Anti-Tank Companies. And we can see the distinctive T for Tobruk. So those units that had served in Tobruk got the distinction of wearing a T-coloured or T-shaped colour patch to signify their staunch resistance at Tobruk. We also see the 28th Infantry Battalion, 1915-18, Gallipoli, Belgium and France, and that's where the 2nd 28th got their lineage from.
Second 28th Battalion, sorry, was almost wiped out during the Battle of Ruin Ridge in July 1942. It was reformed afterwards and went on to serve in Borneo and Lae during the later stages of the Second World War. Now the 32nd Battalion, remembered for its distinguished service in the Western Desert at Tobruk and El Alamein, and in the Pacific Theatre in New Guinea and Borneo. The unit suffered 214 killed and 567 wounded during the war. Second 43rd Battalion served in El Alamein, New Guinea, Borneo, so both the Western Desert and the Pacific during the Second World War. It was actually re-raised in 1966 as a National Service Battalion in South Australia. Second 48th Battalion has the distinction of being one of the most highly decorated infantry battalions in the Commonwealth during the Second World War, with 4 of its members being awarded the Victoria Cross, amongst them 2 West Australians, Stan Gurney and Percy Gratwick. Great to see family members of the unit marching today in honour of their relatives. 2nd Commando Squadron, the Double Reds, fought in Timor, New Guinea and New Britain. The Timor action was eventually a success to the Kokoda Trail campaign, as it stopped up to 10,000 Japanese troops being deployed to New Guinea to fight the Australians. Now we can see the 2nd, 3rd Machine Gunners and Relatives Association of WA, formed in June 1940, took part in the Syrian campaign against the Vichy French. After Japan's entry into the war, the 2nd, 3rd was sent to Java as part of Black Force, where after a short resistance, the unit was ordered to surrender. Next up is the 2nd, 4th Machine Gun Battalion, raised in Western Australia, and unfortunately was captured during the fall of Singapore in February 1942. Of the 965 men of the 2nd, 4th, just over 50% returned to their families at war's end. We can see the distinctive Tobruk T of the 2nd 7th Australian Field Regiment, which is a well-respected West Australian field artillery unit that saw action at the decisive Battle of El Alamein, firing their 25-pounder guns, which was described by Winston Churchill as the turning point of World War II. The unit also saw active service in Egypt, Libya, Palestine and Syria, as well as the Battle of Tarankan in Borneo towards the end of the Second World War. The 2nd 13th Field Ambulance, formed in WA as a matter of urgency in December 1940. The unit saw active service in Egypt, Tobruk and the Western Desert, and played an integral role in the evacuations of Greece and Crete. Went on to serve in the Pacific Theatre in the later stages of the war.
And even though most of the World War II veterans have passed on, it's great to see family members picking up that mantle and representing their loved ones and relations. And here we have the Rats of Tobruk Association coming up. And it's the descendants of the Rats of Tobruk, once again, you know, representing those family members that had served. And there is the distinctive T in red for Tobruk. and it's a WA Remembrance Association. So we have children, grandchildren, and I would dare say great or even great-great-grandchildren marching today.
There's the Churchland Senior High School Marching Band. Second time for them. They've actually got 2 bands today, Churchland Senior High. Drum Major Aaron Grant. Remember, when the Anzac program ends at 10:30 today, we'll cross to Gallipoli for the dawn service at Anzac Cove.
Here we have the Bomber Command veterans. Australia participation was around about 10,000 aircrew, of whom over 4,000 were killed in action. And in fact, we lost Doug Arrowsmith, DFC OAM, between last Anzac Day and this Anzac Day, and he's most likely the last Western Australian World War II aircrew member to have been decorated during World War II, and he was aged 101. We have the distinctive flags of the Vietnamese Ex-Servicemen Association, and these are the chaps who fought for the ARVN, or with the ARVN, against the communists from North Vietnam in the forlorn hope of saving their country. Now united as one Vietnam. And we see the distinctive dress there, lovely greens and yellows. Fantastic. Greek Australians, we can see there's some very young kids there from Greek heritage, and they fought in Korea alongside the Australians, and of course, you know, staunch resistance against the enemy in World War II that invaded Greece. We see that chap there with the banners wearing his relatives' medals from Korea. And we have a huge Greek community in Australia, stemming back to the 50s and such, and well integrated. Indian Defence Forces have a strong history with the British Empire back to the Victorian period, extensive service in World War I and World War II, and in Korea they actually supplied a field hospital that was neutral and treated enemy and friend alike. And of course, they've been very, very heavy on UN peacekeeping missions.
Anzac Day remains an incredibly important part of the community, of the nation. 89 commemorative services held around WA today. Name Anzac Day started in 1916, of course, after April 25, 1915, when Australian and New Zealand soldiers, as part of an Allied expedition, set out to capture the Gallipoli Peninsula. Over 8,000 Australian soldiers were killed before the Allied forces were evacuated in 1915. We'll see the odd rosemary sprig being worn today. It's a symbol of remembrance, with rosemary growing wild on the Gallipoli Peninsula, the reason it's been adopted as that symbol. The Anzac Day March of 2024 continues. Clint Wilden alongside Steve Danaher and Paul Salpietro with you for the coverage. Good crowds, as you can see. 7 or 8 deep on either side of St George's Terrace in the CBD. Despite the cool conditions, it was about 15 degrees when we started this morning. A bit blustery as well. Bracing conditions for those marching and those watching alike.
And here we have the Korean Veterans Association of Western Australia. The Korean War actually has not finished. There is a very uneasy peace. Over 1 million casualties over that 3-year period. And I'd just like to mention that the new memorial for the Korean War was unveiled in July of last year up at Kings Park. So for those who wish to have a look at that, the names of the West Australians who had served there are emblazoned on the back of the memorial, and it is a fitting tribute to all participants of the Korean War.
A reminder again at the end of our coverage of the Anzac Day March will take you across to Gallipoli for the dawn service live this year. That's at 10:30. We'll have a couple of wonderful stories put together as well. The perfect way to lead in, sending you to Gallipoli for that dawn service.
And while we've got a moment, I'd just like to talk about what the spirit of Anzac means to me. I was contacted by Chaplain Bernie Yesberg only last week about a young chap who was in Fiona Stanley Hospital recovering from lifelong injuries. Chuck McGregor Shaw and his wife Mary Lou were seriously injured in an outback car accident. They have 3 young boys, 16, 14 and 11. Chuck was served with Interfet in the Black Hawk helicopters with 5 Aviation. He left the Army in 2002. Since his old comrades have found out about his serious injuries, he's been overwhelmed with the support that he has received. And one of the things when I was talking to him in hospital there was he talked about the Army family and how his mates look after mates. I interpret that as the Anzac spirit that embodies service, national pride and mateship. Values which reflect not just military service, but help underpin our wonderful society that we enjoy today. So to Chuck, I wish you all the best and a speedy recovery. Rhodesians there, Rhodesian Forces Association of Western Australia, very, very strong indeed. We see berets there, the Selous Scouts, Rhodesian Light Infantry. Many ex-Rhodesians are now living in Western Australia, and they have monthly meetings at the Osborne Park RSL.
City of Perth band. They're nicely spaced out now, the groups marching, which I always wish would happen with the veterans earlier on. All the banners always seem to be stuck so close together. There's no real opportunity to talk about them.
No, we miss that, don't we? And you know, it's all the soldiers just want to catch up with each other. It's just one of those things. So, like they might miss out on morning tea or something. So anyway, here we have gone straight to the Sikhs. Very colourful display. The Sikhs offered great service in World War I. They fought in Afghanistan, China, Gallipoli, Egypt, France and the Middle East. And they did all the hard work in Burma, the jungles of Burma and Malaya, the deserts of North Africa and the mountains of Italy and Greece. we're waiting for the next groups to come along. Just a little shout out to a military historian friend of mine who's recuperating in Hollywood Hospital, Rhonda Grand. Not doing too well, but wish you all the best, Rhonda. Love you.
And as always, big shout out to Wayne Gardner, who was so helpful to us for so many years on the Perth Anzac Day March. Now, there are a number of important milestones every year, Steve, that are worth going through as we look back on particular dates in history.
Yeah, of course. I mean, most people think that Australia's first involvement in World War I was Gallipoli. Well, that's not the case. In September of 1914, Australia created a force, the Australian Naval and Military Expeditionary Force, and they were sent to German New Guinea to take the German wireless radio station that was up there. And we did suffer losses, and that was the complete loss of the AE-1 submarine with all hands, and she was discovered in December 2017. Up until that point, they didn't have a clue as to what had actually occurred. The second action before Gallipoli was the Sydney-Emden action in November of 1914, when the HMAS Sydney was on troop escort duty to the Middle East, and it was diverted to the Cocos Island after a message was received that the German shore party had landed, and to take that wireless station. There was a gun battle ensued, the Emden was badly damaged, and Admiral Karl von Mueller beached the ship on North Keeling Island.
And you look here at the Air Force Cadets. Number 7 Wing Contingent led by Officer Commanding Wing Commander Damien Lambert this year, their 83rd anniversary year. They also served throughout the march as banner bearers for the Royal Australian Air Force Association branches and other groups that were marching in today's parade. And we've seen them a number of times, the Australian Air Force Cadets of number 718 Flight Drum and Band Corps. There's over 1,200 Air Force Cadets and 152 staff across the state, based in 16 metropolitan and country squadrons. Their headquarters, as you would expect, at RAAF base in Pearce. And worth mentioning too, not seeing the Army Cadets at the moment, but Brigadier Amanda Williamson, you've seen a number of times taking the salute after taking charge of 13 brigades, started in the Army Cadets. Worked her way all the way up to now be Brigadier of 13 Brigade. Another one of the bands who provide so much of the colour, the pageantry and the noise, of course, for Anzac Day. Crowds have stayed. People again coming along in big numbers to pay their respects, to thank those that have served and indeed who continue to serve on Anzac Day of 2024. Delighted to bring it to you, the Perth Anzac Day March on ABC television.
Clint, was that the WA Fire and Emergency Service concert band we're seeing there? I think it is, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, good. And here we have the Department of Fire and Emergency Services themselves. They were established on the 1st of November 2012, 27,000 volunteers and around 1,600 operational staff. They operate 24 hours a day, every day of the year. DFES provides emergency services across our vast state of 2.5 million square kilometres on land, sea and air. Now, they do a fantastic job. If you see a bushfire, they're into it. And all sorts of emergency situations. We can't live without DFES.
Bands are coming thick and fast. This is the WA Police Pipe Band. We're told led by Drum Major Darren King. WA Police supporting the community of WA as they would since 1966. the police pipe band, performing at approximately 200 engagements per year, the police pipe band. There they are. And the WA Police Force themselves.
And we can see there there's the distinctive UN blue berets by the WA Police. Like all police forces in Australia, they get an opportunity to deploy on United Nations peacekeeping. And there we have service in Timor, I notice.
These must be the WA Police Rangers. Offered in partnership with Cadets WA, open to people of high school age around the state. Designed to increase youth self-confidence, leadership ability, team building skills and self-esteem. Many of the Rangers go on to careers in the emergency services, police, fire, SES and with ambulance. And also into the Australian Defence Force, the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and many also move into leadership roles with other agencies and organisations. Australian Red Cross, led by Diane Buckles, who's been an active member and a volunteer of the Australian Red Cross since 1999. Staff, members and volunteers marching today. History going back to 1914, the Australian branch of the British Red Cross Society was formed on the outbreak of the First World War. It's one of Australia's most trusted and effective partners in disaster preparedness and response. It's part of, alongside the Red Cross, one of the largest humanitarian networks in the world, links to 190 national societies right around the globe.
And for those of you who are thinking about donating blood, please don't think about it, just do it. They need it. I think I'm on my about 28th donation, and it doesn't hurt a bit. Well, just a little bit. Here we have the Papua New Guinea Association of Western Australia, absolutely colourful, as you would expect. And it's wonderful to see our Prime Minister walking the Dakota track at the moment. I'm sure he's putting in a huge effort. Without the porters from World War II, from the New Guinea natives there, our campaign would have failed miserably. They carried mountains of food, water, ammunition up the track, brought wounded soldiers back down the track. Tens of thousands were employed in that. And again, an absolutely wonderful job. Thank you, Papua New Guinea.
Shout out to people who went to dawn services right around WA today. A text from a good friend of mine, Tiny Holly, saying he was at the dawn service in Harvey. It was freezing, not just chilly as it was in Perth, but freezing down there. I know many people right around the state.
Well, even the cows didn't come in for milking. Anyway, the Polish Veterans Association fought tenaciously in World War II, particularly with the Polish fighter squadrons that flew in the Battle of Britain. And although they represented only 6% of pilots, they actually accounted for 20% of enemy planes shot down. So they really did punch above their weight. Many Polish World War II veterans migrated to Australia after the war, and a lot of their sons and grandsons have served in the Australian forces, Korea, Vietnam, and right up till today. The Chinese World War I and World War II Defence Force descendants. Little is known here in Australia about the contribution of the Chinese in World War II. 450 million Chinese were fighting the Japanese, our enemy, in World War II. Japan actually invaded China in the 1930s. And they also gave great support to downed airmen, etc., that had managed to get to safe lands in China. And their aim is hoping to increase the friendship relations between our two countries. So well done to our Chinese population here in Australia. We appreciate what you did. And behind them we have two figures there. There we are in the screen. Relatives of deceased veterans. And we can see that chap there with a photo in his hand. He's wearing a Distinguished Conduct Medal and a World War I pair for probably his grandfather's service. And well done for you, sir, for remembering your relation. I can't see the name of the chap there. Looks like black. But thank you. James Black, I think he's in a trench mortar battery from what that shaky image on the screen.
Scouts Association of Australia, the WA branch here. Scouts been in operation for well over 115 years. Established in most nations around the world. There's a membership of about 50 million. And the aim of the Scout Association to encourage the social, the physical, intellectual, emotional and spiritual development of young people so they can take a constructive place in society as responsible citizens. So the Governor of WA, Honourable Chris Dawson, will hear more from him very shortly here on the Anzac Day March of 2024. And behind the Scouts, the Girl Guides WA. Karen Matusik from the Joondalup Twilight Girl Guides, we're told, leading the contingent. Member of Girl Guides WA for over 35 years. Girl Guides WA, member organisation of Girl Guides Australia, the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. Membership of over 10 million girls and women in 150 nations around the world. Part of a number of select community organisations asked to participate in Government House Open Day as part of the Boorloo Heritage Festival. They've done so many things. They celebrate Harmony Week, International Women's Day. You'd have seen them, no doubt, over the years, hard at work across the state, cleaning up local parks, bushland, beaches, streets as part of Clean Up Australia Day. And that's where we conclude our march for 2024. Steve Danaher and Paul Salpietro. Another wonderful day with a day that means and continues to mean so much for so many people. I was listening to ABC radio this morning and people from around the state ringing in and saying that the numbers continue to grow at dawn services as people really do embrace and gain a greater understanding about what Anzac Day means.
Yes, and look, it's not just about the military, as I alluded to earlier. I think Anzac Day it's there for the Australian spirit and what this country means to us. And I don't think we should take for granted the freedoms that we enjoy today. You know, and military only make up a little bit of that. It's not a perfect system, the parliamentary system that we have, but it's certainly a lot better than many other countries. We do have freedom of speech, and we have many freedoms that we enjoy. And I think, you know, until you've travelled overseas and to some of the poorer countries in the world, you don't realise how lucky this country is, and I really do believe that.
Paul? I think it's worth as well just our thoughts today to the ADF personnel who are currently on active service, be they overseas or here in Australia. Definitely worth, you know, it's a day to remember our veterans, but also to remember our current serving personnel who put their lives on the line every day for us. Certainly something that we should remember every day, not just Anzac Day, but certainly today, just a little bit of time to reflect on that.
Steve Danaher, Paul Salpietro, thank you for sharing the commentary duties with me today on ABC television. That's where we'll leave the Anzac Day March for 2024. A reminder, despite last year's colourful service. No service in the concert hall today. The RSL has instead decided to host a mateship day on Langley Park. That's about to take place now. If you see a veteran or a service person today, please say g'day. It's been a privilege to be involved. Thank you so much for being with us here on ABC Television. Let's cross now to Turkey. Before we do that, two stories that make up the perfect lead into the dawn service.
Frank Smith fought in 3 of the bloodiest battles of the Great War. That was 100 years ago. So how do we tell his story today? Well, we need a storyteller, someone who's investigative and sympathetic, and hopefully someone related to the central character.
One of the things that I do recall my grandmother saying to me a number of times, she would point to 3 oval sepia photos, and they were diggers with slouch hats on. And I remember as a little fella looking up at them and recalling my grandmother saying, "Always remember my 3 brave brothers. They were very brave men."
In 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. Australia followed, and almost immediately young men were training at Black Boy Hill in Perth. One of them, one of the 3 brothers in sepia, was Frank Smith. He was 23, a barman from Boulder.
He came down on the train from the goldfields with many other from Kalgoorlie, Boulder and the surrounds, and joined up, I think, with a lot of his mates.
From Black Boy Hill to Egypt, the next stop, Turkey. Anzac Cove, Gallipoli.
They were landed, according to the regimental records, about 4:30 a.m. on April 25th. They landed just really to the north of Anzac Cove, and as we know from our records, there was quite a high attrition on that first landing, but he was amongst those that got through that landing unscathed. They made good gains in there, but of course very quickly got pinned down.
Frank Smith left Gallipoli with a promotion and shrapnel wounds. Now he would fight Germans on the Somme.
It was one of those battles of the Somme, battles in which the Australians distinguished themselves, but enormous loss of life. Now, what I know from Frank's record there is that when he was leading B Company there, he was involved in leading his troops forward to capture a number of machine gun emplacements, and he then later, after capturing the German guns, was pinned down, and they held out for over 12 hours. They were called upon to surrender by overwhelming force, but they mowed down 60 of the enemy and then got his guns away and got his men away. So for that, he was awarded the Military Cross.
The Great War is coming to an end. Frank Smith is still in France. Amazingly, still alive.
He survived 3 years of war and major battles, but on the 25th of April, they're again involved in a major battle to retake Villa-Bretonneux. And the accounts are that he was by then a captain and an experienced one at that. He was moving from one of the trenches to go to another brigade to pass a message on, but he stood up at a parapet and was shot in the chest. So I've read the accounts of where his colleagues saw him shot, and looks like he was killed in action instantly, and exactly 3 years to the day. So for one of the original Anzacs to then get killed on Anzac Day 3 years later, in terms of that. This is not something to be glorified, but it's something that we need to remember for the reasons that sacrifice was made for, of course, what we now enjoy as a country is the liberty that we really do need to defend. And so that's why, for me, it's more than a moment of family history or poignancy. This is about actually trying to unpack and understand why it's important not to glorify war, but to remember the sacrifice of those that gave their lives to the freedoms that we now enjoy. They were clearly fighting for their mates and fighting for their country, and they were doing their duty. At one point in time, he swore an oath, as I have, to do your duty, and I've got no doubt that that's exactly what Frank was up to.
In September 1914, Frank Smith's enlistment oath contained these words: "I will well and truly serve our sovereign Lord the King." In July 2022, his great-nephew, Chris Dawson, the storyteller, swore the same oath to King George's granddaughter, Elizabeth, the late Queen. Every war has its photographic icon. The Napalm Girl, naked, Vietnam. The Dancing Man at the outbreak of peace, Sydney. Aussie diggers posing on a pyramid, Egypt, of course. This is the West Australian Army Museum in Fremantle, a place packed with memories from all our wars, not just the first. A question for you. If you had the choice, what would you choose to hang on your office wall? Stephen Muir is museum manager, and this is his office. He's also an Army major and would no doubt have had such a choice. And it looks like Steve went iconic. Only he didn't. That's not the famous 11th photo, it's the 12th. A lot of people make that mistake, apparently.
I think most people just look at it and automatically think that's the 11th, I've already seen it, not interested, so they don't look any closer.
Both battalions were at Mina Camp in the shadows of the Sphinx and pyramids, but their photographs are different.
The 11th Battalion, or the photo, is the entire battalion. There were some people missing from that photo because they were off doing duties or training on courses or in hospital and so on. The 12th Battalion was a composite battalion made up of companies from South Australia, Tasmania and Western Australia. And the men in the photo behind me now are only the Western Australians.
In all collections, provenance is the thing. In the case of the photo of the 11th, no problem. Provenance of the 12th's photo started with a phone call from Brisbane. Museum curator Stephen Sinclair continues.
I got onto the phone with the gentleman and he said, look, I've got this photo here. I've been cleaning out my father's belongings and shed and building, etc. And it's a photo of one of our relatives who was in 12th Battalion in the First World War, and he's a West Australian. And he said, do you want it? And I said, well, if it's got a West Australian focus, more than happy to have it. And I said, how do you want to get this to us or whatever? And he said, that's fine, I'll just put it in the mail to you. And I said, we need to get some provenance for it in terms of who donated it. No, don't worry about it. I'm happy to send it to you.
A month later, a parcel arrived. Inside was the photograph of the 12th in a manky wooden frame, Stephen's description, and history was saved from the tip.
I guess one of the things about Australian diggers and culture is that at that stage they hadn't seen combat. They were all sort of thinking they were going off on this adventure, and the rumour around when you joined up was, this will all be over in months. I think they were just enjoying themselves on a trip. Let's record the history, let's mates together, and what do we want to do that's different, rather than just having a photo done wherever. There's an iconic piece of history in terms of a pyramid and one of the 7 wonders of the world, so why not?
The resulting photos are clearly not wonders of the world, but are they even icons?
We've shown it to the Australian War Memorial and they were very interested in it, but they'd never seen a copy of it before. Certainly outside Australia it wouldn't be known at all.
They are both significant because they belong to West Australian military history, the 11th being what it is and the photo being what it is. But we also consider the 12th photo as fairly iconic because it represents a group of West Australians specifically who went to war.
The 11th already has its place on the podium, probably helped by the rumour of a dead digger propped up for the camera by his mates. Just not true, say both Stephens. Supporters of the 12th point to this man, the grandson of the Eureka Stockade's Peter Lalo. He was a captain and was killed at Gallipoli day 1. Is the Lalo connection enough to lift it from a happy snap to a military icon?
We were very interested because they are specifically Western Australians, and at this museum we are focused specifically on Western Australian experience of war.
It reminds me of youth and lost youth and an era of, I guess for want of a better word, a period of time that is forgotten because of the current generation. The education process about the war, Gallipoli, the whole First World War process is not necessarily taught very well.
It probably tugs at my heartstrings a little bit because they are the underdogs, I suppose, the not so well-known soldiers. So I really like the photo.
Lost youth, tugged heartstrings. The diggers posed on Khufu's pyramid have surely given us another Australian photographic icon.